Welcome to Cultivate, a weekly webcast dedicated to sharing cannabis knowledge that empowers the entrepreneurial spirit that drives this industry. I'm your host, Genifer Murray. During these sessions, we'll speak with top scientists, business executives, and entrepreneurs who will share their views on where the industry is going, the importance of data for science and technology innovation, and so much more.
Today's guest is Michael Bronstein. He is the co-founder of the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp, otherwise known as ATACH. He also is very politically involved, and I'm going to let him talk about all of those things. But welcome, Michael Bronstein.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks so much for having me here.
Great. Well, let's start with how did you get into the cannabis industry and when?
So I got into the cannabis industry about 4 years ago, which seems like a lifetime in the cannabis industry. 1 year in the cannabis industry is equal probably to 20 in another profession, just because of how quickly things change. And it had been brought to my attention. A number of cannabis industry leaders had approached me on the basis of my political reputation. And they had said to me, we don't feel like we're achieving all that we could be achieving from a marketplace advancement perspective. And we don't feel like that we're accomplishing the types of things in the speed of which we need to accomplish them. And I remember having that conversation and thinking, as a political consultant, cannabis is a huge issue, and it's going to be a huge issue. But I didn't know right then and there how integral a part it would play both in my own life and advocacy, but also in my own professional career moving forward. I'm a Democratic political consultant by trade, have elected many people to office across the country, and it wasn't necessarily something that I was looking at. It was certainly something that I was following, and I laid out a strategy of which industry leaders would be able to come together, professionalize the industry, and achieve results that hadn't been achieved up to that point. And that effort became the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp, of which I am a co-founder, and has become one of the most influential trade groups in the industry. And we're very proud of the work that we've done through that association. And it's really cemented a lot of the work that I've done on legalization. So in Pennsylvania, I was very involved in the medical marijuana campaign and helping get industry efforts together to work with advocates. In New Jersey, we've been helping push the law in New Jersey. In Florida, we were intimately involved. We've built relationships all out west in order to find sound regulation. So it's been a very, very exciting ride.
Now, you said that there were people unhappy with how it was going. How did they find you?
Well, it was basically on the basis of my political reputation. So I think that I was found because I had elected a number of people to office. I had a reputation and still have to this day, a reputation as a political consultant. And it happened to be another issue advocacy effort that had come in front of me. And I think that I was found that there were some people mutually who had taken notice of some of the work that I had done in the issue advocacy space and what I was doing politically, and felt that outreach would be a good outreach to have. And I was not the only one that they spoke to at the time. In fact, I was told, I remember after I had a conversation and sort of laid out strategy, I didn't really think about it for the next couple of months. And I got a call and they said, listen, we would like you to lead this effort. And I had to go back and remember the conversation and the strategy that I had laid out for it. And so, I wasn't, I think there were a lot of people being talked to about the time, but I think that I understood the marketplace, where it needed to go. And I wasn't really afraid to execute on that vision and to talk about what it meant to professionalize the industry and see a lot of the things that we're seeing today, where we're seeing, we're seeing companies that are from outside the industry eyeing the cannabis industry as being very legitimate and the next big thing. But we had to do years worth of work to get to the point where people would look at the cannabis industry. Everybody sort of knew that cannabis could be a very big thing. But the work that it took to get cannabis to be legitimate, it took all of us. I mean, it took the work that you were doing, Jen. It took the work that major companies have been doing. It took personal and professional risks that people who are getting into the industry right now will not really ever know because of the work that was done before they entered. So I remember, when I was doing it, my concern 4 years ago was I was electing, and elect members of Congress or elect people to statewide office, and being out in front on the issue advocacy side on this particular issue, it was not clear whether or not how popular this issue would become or where the public would be. Because it's one thing to legalize, and it's quite another thing to have the public come along with you for that ride. And there was an education process that was done. And I think all of us who lent their names to that effort should be proud of where we sit today, because I believe firmly that we are right now at the verge of federal legalization, and the actions that we've all been a part of have led to this moment.
You do feel that we're close to federal legalization. Tell me a little bit about that. It's been rumored. I thought it would happen like this year. I think I said 5 years ago it'd be 5 years. So what's changing on the landscape there that you're close to, where you think it could happen sooner than later?
It's just very clear to me from meeting with lawmakers, meeting with regulators, meeting with large mainstream interests and businesses and trade associations from other industries, that the momentum and the conversation is much different. It's more like, how are we going to make this legal? It's not if or will or when. And I think that even we're seeing opposition right now. They're sort of in the death throes of what it is that they are, what it is that they expect the marketplace to be. And if you notice, the type of arguments that they're making right now are not, should we, no, this should not be legalized. To be sure, they're against that. But the difference right now is, well, how is this going to happen? Is there a pathway? What does that pathway look like? The conversation looks like we're moving to a more to a regulated market that is legal at the federal level. And to be sure, it is going to take a lot of work to get between now, today, and what we might see next year or what we might see the following year. But I am convinced that the resources, the talent, and the effort from businesses, from advocacy groups, and from more mainstream organizations is there and organized or organizing in a way that it has not before. So I feel a lot more confident about the prospects of legalization from the political side than I have previously.
Well, that's good, since politics mainly drives it. So do you think legalization in Canada is supposed to happen October 17th? Do you think that has kind of forced the hand in the United States or anything?
When the history book is written about federal legalization in the United States, it will be impossible to write about it without talking about what's happened in Canada and the Canadian enterprise. Because what Canada has done has enabled other industries. It has enabled public market trading of companies. It has allowed capital flow from legitimate capital sources. It has created a situation where there is more quote unquote normalcy around the business. I mean, we see a deal of Constellation Brands getting involved in the industry. We see today, I was reading about Molson Coors and some of the involvement that they were thinking about. When companies with big, bold names start staking out investments in the industry, and to be sure, there is an idea inside the industry of what things may look like after legalization. But from my own perspective and where I sit from speaking to regulators and lawmakers, this type of activity cannot be discounted. And not only that, it should be encouraged. Because one of the things is that it legitimizes all the work that everybody else is doing. And in the United States, what it's done, people have taken note, and it has created a sense of urgency to do something from a policy perspective, because we are missing out. When companies see Tilray, for example, which is an excellent company, when people see that they're now able to study medicinal cannabis in the United States through an agreement where they can import or they can export into the United States for these studies. I heard from a number of companies in the United States that day that people felt that it was a missed opportunity. We saw members of Congress tweeting about it. So the sense of urgency around this is there, and the mainstreaming of the industry is happening as we speak.
Well, speaking of Canada, there's some very interesting things going on there, especially since they are going to legalize. Let's talk about this border problem, if you will. What's going on with that? And also, to tag onto that, you see a ton of American companies rolling or reverse merging into Canadian companies on the stock exchange. So how is all this going to fall out, do you think?
So very much so in the public marketplace. In my view, it's the next line to defense legalization. Capital flow has been some of the most important aspects to marketplace development in any normal market, but certainly in the cannabis market. To be able to engage in activities like that helps to normalize the business. It helps businesses raise money, and it helps them in their operations. So to me, this is very much the front line of the next part of legalization. And from a regulatory perspective, it's uncharted water. So I'm speaking to federal regulators all the time on both sides of the border. I've met with Canadian officials, including the Minister of Justice in Canada, and other Canadian officials. Have spoken to the head of the major exchanges in Canada. And it's something that I have been watching very closely. Because in my view, this is probably the biggest and most central issue in the legalization argument from a regulation perspective, of seeing large established businesses doing reverse takeovers on the Canadian Security Exchange in order to secure capital and invest in American businesses. And people are taking note. When we watch CNBC, we see companies that have done it. We see companies openly talk about how that is helping them expand in the United States marketplace. And I also know that from a regulatory perspective, regulators are watching too. I've had questions from attorney generals. It's come up in forums with law enforcement about this type of activity. And remember, it is very different to a regulator when you are doing an activity in a state that's regulated versus taking capital and raising capital on a public market and then investing it in a legal state operation because you're crossing an international border. So it's not just, and right now we're reading stories on the border, and I've had many stories reported to me on the border that are very concerning from a cannabis industry perspective. So there was a company, there were company executives that were stopped at the border and given lifetime bans who were ancillary. They were ancillary companies in the business. It's been said by the U.S. government that Canadian investors would be stopped and questioned at the border. These were not just offhanded comments either. This was issued in a Customs and Border Patrol release. So now it's stated policy, or it's written as policy, enforcement policy of what might happen at the border. And to me, it's discouraging news. But it's definitely a situation that we should not take lightly. So it's important that we create dialogue here, that we monitor it, and we're creating a situation where the industry really does need to be defensed.
So what do you think is driving this from the U.S.'s perspective? Is it tax money? What is it?
So when it comes to law enforcement and when it comes to regulation, I think that there is a thought that money and being able to bring in money is the be all and end all of a political argument. But it's not. Because if we could go into a state or a jurisdiction and say, okay, it's just the dollars, all of this would be fixed right now. In order to get to the dollars and cents argument, you need to promote what that system is going to look like and make people feel comfortable with it, that the type of system that you're going to put in is going to be effective. Remember, it's not, tax and regulate campaigns weren't just tax campaigns, right? It was tax and regulate.
Yep.
And regulators are very interested in what the regulation side of it looks like. And in the United States, to people who oppose the policy, they feel that they're not just making a law enforcement argument, but that they feel that they're making, in their words, a moral argument. And these are things that we have to deal with through education, so that people can understand that the information that they have or that they've been given over the last several years from the government and from other places has misled and misinformed some views. And I think that the broader public is understanding that. And the conversation with the regulators here, okay, it's money, to be sure, it matters, and people do it. But what does responsibility look like? Okay, what does responsible use look like? What does professionalization look like? What do standards for the industry look like? How does the industry become more normal in its operations? And how are we dealing with regulation to be able to make sure that there aren't diversion issues, which I think the industry has been dealing with in a very effective way, and people don't understand how regulated it is, with consumption issues, which are being raised by lawmakers, and how we responsibly deal with these issues in coming to market. Because if we do deal with those issues the right way, the market will be there and support will be there.
Very good. I am very interested in all of that. It's definitely not my forte, understanding all of that. What I do find interesting are these American companies, if you will, rolling into the Canadian companies. There have been companies, obviously, that did reverse mergers into the penny stocks in the United States, which of course I'm familiar with, which my company did early on, and most of those did not fare very well. What is the difference? Hold on. Honey. What is the difference between our Gigi? No.
Hi, Gigi.
I know, poor Gigi. She's like, what? I hear something. She never barked before, but oh well. So what are the differences between the, if you will, the OTC or the penny stocks here in the United States and then the exchange in Canada? Is that exchange equal to the NASDAQ here? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So from a business perspective, you have a couple of major, you have a couple of exchanges in Canada that have listings. One is the CSE, which is the Canadian Securities Exchange. One of the ways to sort of describe it, I heard a securities lawyer describe, the exchange as a very good place to be able to publicly place private capital. Because of the regulations that are involved with it. And it's a very favorable place right now for cannabis companies to come in, do reverse takeovers, and be able to raise money in a public setting. And it's I believe right now, as of this morning, there are 44 companies that have gone public on the Canadian exchange that are cannabis companies that are that view that marketplace as a place to be. And then there's more traditional stock exchange like the Toronto Stock Exchange, which is what you would think of sort of a little bit more suit and tie, I would say, formal where stocks are being traded as well. But the Canadian Securities Exchange has presented a really exciting opportunity for cannabis companies to be able to push it forward. And I had a great conversation with the CEO of the Canadian Securities Exchange, and he mapped out the vision that the exchange has for it in order to be an open and regulated marketplace to be able to raise capital for companies that are trading on their exchange, and they have a commitment to be able to see those things through. And I think that it really, the fact that they've stepped into the mix, in my view, being able to raise money in public, being able to have public filings, to me was a game-changing moment. And to be sure, there are companies that are listed on on NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, as well as the Toronto Stock Exchange. But right now, what we're seeing on the Canadian Securities Exchange and some of these other exchanges, I believe firmly that cannabis companies are making history right now and legitimatizing the industry.
Now, excuse my ignorance on this topic, but how does it work if you are trading on, can you trade on both an American stock exchange and a Canadian stock exchange?
There are cross listings that happen. So there are a few companies that are cross listed on the exchanges. So I'm not familiar with every single detail of how the listings go about. I do know from the cases that I've seen that from a practical standpoint that has gone on.
Now, 44 companies have done this. What is that going to look like in a year? Is this a bubble? Is this telecom? Surely not all of these companies are going to be make it. And the numbers that you're seeing on overall evaluations, when some of these don't even really have operations up, is very scary. And as you mentioned, Constellation, $4 billion invested. That's going to be really hard to compete with. So how are these companies all going to do it?
In my view, there'll be others. I think that people are looking at strategic partnerships in the market. Constellation Brands is one of several companies that does what they do, and has a portfolio of either wine and spirits or beer. There are a lot of different companies. There's also companies from the outside. There have been a couple of pharmaceutical companies that have looked to take smaller stakes in the industry, and there's been a tobacco company or two that has taken a look at it. And I'll tell you something, those are the three types of companies that are very often discussed as people who are circling the market. But here's the thing that we forget, they're nutraceutical companies that look at this. There are, I got off the phone yesterday with a very large nutraceutical trade association, and a number of their members are taking a look at it. and seeing sort of where they feel that their place in the market is. And because cannabis is not just one vertical in the marketplace, when we talk about cannabis, we're talking about a panoply of products, of usages, of applications. These are things that go across a wide regulatory spectrum, but also a wide product spectrum. One of the things that I think the market hasn't sorted out, interestingly enough, we see companies that a lot of times they feel that their product is analogous to something that is in the market already. So I see a number, and I've talked to a number of alcohol companies that say, okay, we're going to make a THC-infused drink, and we're going to take our product because people would like our product without alcohol in it. Yeah. So if we just substitute the THC for what the alcohol is, we'll be able to create a whole other vertical out of it. And in my view, I think that the cannabis consumer, even if it's the same person that is consuming a beer and also consuming cannabis, that person has different consumption patterns potentially of why they're having one and not the other, right? So the reason why somebody, the reason why somebody might be eating a cherry out of their refrigerator rather than sucking on a cherry flavored candy, those are two different things, even though they might be the same flavor. Right. So I think that there's some comparisons that are going on in the marketplace that may or may not be analogous to what the end consumer is eventually going to want or make those decisions on. And that's something that I think from a marketplace development perspective, companies have to watch as they're developing their products.
Oh my God, if we could have a product that gave you some of what alcohol does as far as a buzz or a high or whatever, I could probably say that most people would give up alcohol, knowing that it's a poison. And then, the more we hear about it, the worse it seems to get. And of course, getting into marijuana, you seem to be paying attention to more of those, pharma, et cetera. So I always also like to think about what would the world look like if alcohol stayed in prohibition and actually cannabis was legal. What would this world look like? How would it look differently? And so it's going to be incredible looking at the future and the different verticals too. I mean, you have preventative medicine. You now have products that, have herbs and are mixed with vitamins. So it would make complete sense for the nutraceutical companies to get involved as well. And I just got back from a CBD conference, and it's exactly the supplement company where they're co-packing. A lot of them aren't doing anything. They are, sourcing material if they even do that. And then they have a co-packer that packs it up and then they drop ship it. And that's usually a lot of supplement companies. But I do hope for CBD regulation. As you know, nobody knows what they're getting, and most of these CBD companies are not testing. And if they are, it's just potency. So where do you think CBD regulation is right now? And are we going to see it regulated like cannabis or THC?
It's probably, and I've given lectures on this, it's probably one of the most confusing regulatory landscapes that exists right now. And I think that in many ways, CBD, and we're talking, maybe a month before the Farm Bill is going to pass. So to date this, some of these issues may be solved or may be talked about in much greater detail going forward. But from a regulatory perspective, CBD is in an area that cannabis right now is not. And I think that there are when I say that, what I mean is that in states there have been a lot of regulation that's developed around the state marketplace. There have been departments of health that have stepped in and done that. On CBD, there's a question. I think that there's a larger question of, where can it be produced? Who can produce it? Where can it be shipped? Is it lawful and legal to ship it across state lines? What type of products is it okay to ship it? And there are different answers depending on who you ask about those types of questions.
Especially attorneys.
Attorneys, yeah, they're attorneys. And a lot of times when companies are coming in, I'll say, well, what is your risk tolerance? What is it that you're looking at? Do you have someone, what do we do with the claims situation that's going on in the marketplace, right? What type of claims are being made about the product? I mean, to be sure, CBD has medicinal value and is very important part of the portfolio of medicines and products that are able to be developed. But from a consumer standpoint, what's the protection that is going to exist on the other side of this for these products to be distributed in a safe and effective manner? And why should businesses care about that? Well, they should care about it because in a safe and effectively regulated marketplace, their business is much less likely to be interfered with or interrupted, and they'll be able to thrive. And this industry is still a very young industry, the CBD market. And in the young marijuana industry, which, as I said, every 20 years per year in the marijuana industry, now the gray-haired marijuana industry, I think had to go through a number of these things. And I can say, look, as somebody who founded the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp, right, we take very seriously what goes on the hemp side of the equation. Our hemp developed CBD, and we have a number of companies that are involved with us and have been at the forefront on this issue. And what I can say to you is that these companies are professionalizing, but there's a long way to go in the marketplace from everybody's understanding about how products are to be developed and how they're to be marketed, and how it is that we as an industry can provide a safe, reliable, and effective product to the consumer, which is something that I know we'll be able to do.
Speaking of the CBD conference I went to, it was unbelievable. All the companies that were selling products that have absolutely no clue what they're talking about. I mean, it was scary. And it did remind me a bit of, back in 2010 when people were talking about crazy things and that, THC is a miracle drug and it cures cancer. And of course, we don't like to say any of those things, even though deep in our hearts, we probably know that. You need, obviously, clinical trials and science to tell you that. But there are CBD multi-level marketing companies. It's unbelievable. And I saw it firsthand where people are lining up to buy products, and the person that's selling them is missing the mark in every way. Like, legitimately, they know nothing about it. But it just seems to be the hot thing and easy because I swear to God, not all of these companies, but certainly a lot of these companies are making a ton of money because of no regulation, no licensing fee, yada, yada.
And the general public also has an appetite for CBD. They know out there's been enough public discussion around the potential benefits of CBD that have been focused on, where if somebody's selling them in shops or somebody is going to look at it online, and there are a number of people who have had very powerful experiences with the product in terms of what's been reported to me, what patients are saying about pain management and things like that. The fact of the matter is, though, is that there needs to be science behind. We would demand this in the public of any product. Sure. But the science and regulation and the things that need to be developed in that marketplace, we as an industry have to do it before it's done to us. And we also have to understand the need for it. And I know from talking to a number of companies around the country that they do have an appetite to be regulated in a way that that they find meaningful, and be able to deliver a product to the consumer that's safe, reliable, effective, and dosage methods are repeatable. And that's something that we hope to see going forward. And look, it's not just an issue for CBD. These are issues that we find in the dietary supplement industry. These are issues that we find. We're not singling out, just the CBD industry here. What we're saying is that we all want to work together. When we go in front of regulators, we want to say that we all are working together to make sure that these issues are addressed so that there isn't interference on the marketplace, so that there's a sensible way to get to market, so that the research backs up any claim that's being made inside the marketplace, and it's not just that the things that we're saying for usage aren't anecdotal, but that they're tested. So there's quality that has to be in there. And look, I think when I said saying stuff like that, I think 4 years ago was pretty radical. Yeah. Saying stuff like that right now is on message. Yeah. Okay. And I've always said what I've said about this today, and I think that the market's very much there to be doing it that way. And I look forward to seeing what type of solutions we see going forward.
And it's all about educating the consumer. I mean, I always thought, before I worked for a sports supplement company, I always thought that everything was tested, that it was verified, that you absolutely knew what you were taking. And that's absolutely not the case. And in fact, a funny story, I worked at EAS, who was, one of the best supplement companies back in the day. And when I was working there, the Detour bar came out, which was literally a Snickers bar practically, with protein in it though, which was, huge back in 2000. And we were all just gobbling them up. And then somebody decided to get it tested. It had no protein in it. And in fact, the entire label was completely off. And I think they got fined heavily. But it just goes to show you. And then obviously all of our food now, where they, call sugar something else. So we have no idea what it is. So I feel like CBD, like you said, it's just another bump in the road. But my question is, or my point is, it would be a tragedy for people to try this CBD, THC, whatever, and think it's a farce because the product they tried actually didn't have the ingredient in it. And that's very scary to me. And I know that has happened. So I just think that we can't educate the consumers enough. And, how do we do that on a large scale?
Yeah, well, I think one of the other things has to do with like the development of efficacy for whether it be a condition or something that somebody's suffering from, and the ability to research and formulate solutions to people who really do have very serious illnesses which can be treated with these different medicines. So that's something that really is ongoing. And part of the problem is with the regulatory restrictions that are put in place right now, it makes it harder to do the research and be able to really unleash what we know from a perspective of the medicinal qualities of the plant and of some of these products. So in many ways, it's a patient advocate situation. It's a broader public discussion about this. And I think that we've largely won public opinion up to this point. I mean, if you look at polling right now, I mean, medical marijuana, polls better than vanilla right now. I mean, it's like, 90% of Americans, like if I asked you what's your favorite ice cream, half the people would say mint chocolate chip, or vanilla. Like we're seeing higher poll numbers for medical, supportive medical cannabis than I've seen. And look, I'm a political consultant. When I see something come back and it's in the 80s or 90s for an approval rate, I mean, there's nothing that gets 80 or 90 from an approval rate. It's literally the one thing that Americans can agree on right now is that they want medical cannabis.
That's right.
Okay, that's it.
Yep.
You know?
And that's what we want to give them. Look, it's not for everybody. It is not a miracle drug, but everybody should have the choice to use it recreationally or medicinally. Now let's circle back to ATACH. I want to talk about CTF and kind of how they're working together, and then talk about how people can get involved or why people want to get involved.
Right. So we have launched a very large federal lobbying effort. It will be the largest federal lobbying effort to date inside the industry. We got together with NFF, and NFF, the New Federalism Fund, was a group that many of you, many in the audience will know, very active in pushing for 280E relief and federal legalization. These are issues that NFF did really well, and we got together with NFF and decided to launch the Cannabis Trade Federation, both with people who are inside ATACH's circle. A number of our board members serve and have donated to the Cannabis Trade Federation. The Cannabis Trade Federation is a C4 lobbying organization that is lobbying in Washington. ATACH is the trade association, so we are the C6 trade association, and we are working together on being able to push federal law. And I think that what you're about to see is one of the largest federal lobbying efforts that really has ever been put together for this industry. I think also one of the more enduring efforts that we see going forward. On ATACH's board, but also with CTF and through NFF, we have basically a who's who of leaders in the industry. And we are we have presented a united front in being able to lobby federally. So I'm very excited about the effort.
And how does that all play out as far as joining? So you would join ATACH, and by the way, ATACH is atach.org, so you can check it out for yourself. But how do those what's the association, like membership options and those kind of things?
Right now, we're going to announce a membership benefit package going into, we're targeting going into next year. So we should have a very concrete announcement about it and what that looks like very shortly, where people can join up both on our federal effort, but also join up inside ATACH and the association. I know a number of people, a number of businesses have been involved in the standards work that we've been doing, in a number of the different state legalization efforts that we've pushed in the regulatory front, and some of the state associations that we've helped materialize, put together, and offer support to. So in being able to bring a real national trade association to the front here through ATACH is been a very important and critical mission of ours, and being able to deal with what marketplace transition looks like going into the next phase of marketplace development. Because remember, now businesses are established and moving. So the advocacy efforts that existed in the industry prior to ATACH's existence dealt with different issues than ATACH has had to deal with in the marketplace. So we are our first and foremost concern is to make sure that that businesses are represented in the marketplace, that there is sensible business regulation, that the consumer is protected, that public health and safety are followed. And as a trade association, we've done a number of things to do that. So ATACH has signed an agreement with ASTM International, which is one of the largest standards bodies in the world, to develop cannabis standards. We did that in 2017. We recently released an MOU that we signed with A2LA, which is the largest nonprofit 501c3 laboratory accreditation organization in the country. They do accreditation everywhere, of which the standards that we've helped adopt through the ASTM International process will be incorporated in, and we will also go in front of state legislators and regulators together to be able to push the standards argument from an advocacy standpoint. And those conversations have been widely viewed by regulators as being a critical turning point inside the industry. In fact, last year, the American Trade Association for Cannabis and Hemp was awarded Trade Association of the Year by Campaigns and Elections magazine. And we were named that over the National Association of Realtors, National Hospital Association, basically a lot of the large DC players in there. And we were really excited about that. So I think that what you're going to see going forward is, ATACH is absolutely the voice of the legitimate industry. We have absolutely put ourselves in a pole position at a national level as being a place where credible industry players who want to see the next stage of development of this industry go to make policy. And I believe that from a marketplace expansion stage, ATACH has been growing, exponentially over the last several years. And I think that the agreements that we've been able to come up with at the national level are a product of the way we're representing people right now.
And you're working with state associations, you said, right? So with new states coming on board, do you get in and try to facilitate some of this, or how is it going to be moving forward? Of course, Colorado has established associations, but then there's been other states that have had associations that haven't been able to make it. Unfortunately, people think, oh, it's legal, and then they don't need to, help lobby anymore, and that's absolutely not the case. So tell me how ATACH works with state associations.
Well, what we found is that we work better together. And in the, ATACH does not run state level associations. Our view is that we want to see states and permit holders organize in the marketplace so that their interests can better be served. So we help encourage that activity. We work with stakeholders on the ground that are organizing. And because of the relationship that we've developed with multi-state license holders that have moved from market to market and been licensed in a number of places, we've developed a reputation of excellence in being able to help establish a credible voice for the industry. So being able to provide the operating procedures, the advice about how people interact with each other in the marketplace, and a lot of times the members of people who've just been licensed, they'll look to us and say, well, what's going on right now? Because we have lawsuits that we have to deal with. We have regulation that's going through. What's the quickest way that we're able to organize? And because of the experience that we've had in other states organizing industry efforts, we lend our expertise in that area. And states are free to do state associations. I think that the best people to represent people on state interests are states and people who are organizing in them. So what we typically do is, we come in, we help, and then we, for anything's ever asked of us, we're here to help. But we like to stay out of the way of any good work that's being done. And in states that already have associations, so the Western Regional Cannabis Business Association, ATACH was at the table for their founding. It's an organization that we support. They have 6 or 7 state level associations out west that they have incorporated into their organization, and we've been working seamlessly with them on the federal level. And I admire these state level organizations and the advocacy that they've put together, because without their work, none of the stuff that we're doing on a marketplace to marketplace would exist. So, I'm very excited about and proud of the work that they're doing and we're participating in.
Well, and you said something that was very important, I think, and that is license holders. A lot of ancillary businesses are supporting, but at the end of the day, it's the license holders that bear all the risk. and have way more regulations, So I think it's important to, have these associations where there are license holders. And to move on from that, is ATACH positioning themselves too as the National Association for the United States, therefore then talk to other countries, because of course other countries are going to look to us for help and et cetera, then hopefully getting importing, exporting, creating relationships. So is that something that ATACH is interested in?
So we've developed relationships overseas, to be sure, because a number of partners have looked and said, well, where are the industry interests going from an association standpoint? And what they want to see is they want to see players that look like their marketplace to be able to advance those types of issues. I myself worked abroad. I used to work for the British Labour Party. I lived in London for 3 years and have broad international experience both through Europe and dealing with Commonwealth countries. In the 2005 general election campaign, I worked for the British Labour Party when Tony Blair was running for re-election, and spent a good amount of time inside the Labour Party, which had a very international presence at that time. And it's an issue that I've cared about in building those types of relationships. And I think that right now, from an American standpoint and what's going on internationally, it's been harder to break through in those conversations just because of the way that the United States is projecting itself internationally. But here's the thing. When we come in as a credible organization and people see who our leadership is, the conversation, people know that they're not having conversations with just advocates. They're having conversations with people who are businesses that are functioning, that are selling in their marketplace. Some of our board, trades internationally. We have some of the largest businesses that are, that are associated with it. And they understand that what we have here is a place for businesses to come, to talk, to advocate. And because we have synergistic conversations that can go on across borders, we're uniquely positioned to be able to have that conversation.
And a very important one. As you said, we're all better in numbers and have the same goal. We'll get much farther than if we're all broke apart. So, but we need to wrap this up. Is there anything else that we missed that you'd like to mention?
No, this has been terrific. I want to thank you for taking the time and allowing me to join you on your program.
No, I totally appreciate your time, and you have taught me a ton of things, and I'm sure that all the viewers will feel the same way. And again, ATACH is atach.org. And then if you have any other questions for Michael or myself, you can email at cultivate@cannabistech.com. Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.